But how about negativity? How about like if you're like, okay, this is my courageous goal, and then you're like, you have all this negativity and this negative self-talk. How can you deal with that ideally?
Something I read in a book and I practice it and it works great for that exact question. Get rid of old baggage. Shred it in your mind or interrupt it if an old thought comes up that's negative. What I tell people is that in order to get where you want to go, you are not required to be the same person you were 5 or 10 minutes ago. You don't have to be the same person. So if old negative thoughts come into your mind, shred them. Get a mental shredder, go and cut them all and cut them up. And I tell you, Sven, that works for me because like, oh man, I didn't get that job. It's gone. Hey, I got that job. Great, it's here. Hey, that client didn't take my call. On to the next. Like, you gotta just move on. Old baggage, negativity, it will hold you down and it'll affect. This is how I ended up with my new podcast. My co-host and I, great guy, but we had a little bit of parting ways because he had an emotional phone call. And when we had a call right after that, he didn't shred the baggage. And he didn't really just say, he kind of let it affect him. And it came into our call and it affected some things that we were growing together. So I tell people all the time, you cannot let negativity, self-doubt, all that hold you back. Because again, old baggage is something that you have to dump and get rid of. Otherwise, it'll hold you down, pull you down, where you can't go forward for what you want in your life.
Okay, thank you. I see. Yeah, it's this negativity. Yeah, sometimes with me, sometimes it kind of creeps up with just a bad feeling. It's not like really, it's kind of tricky with my mind. Like my mind is like, okay, it knows that it cannot like come up as like a phrase or an image. It can it just creeps up with like a negative feeling, and to be aware of that is like it's quite difficult.
Well, here's the thing. Negativity loves isolation. So if you want to also get rid of those thoughts, get a community of people that are going to be supportive of you. That helps you also get rid of that negativity and self-doubt. Because I have a great team now. If I'm having a bad day or a rough day, I call one of my team members, poof, I'm picked right back up. And that's the same thing anybody can do. Surround yourself with a team that's supportive, that actually wants you to do well.
I just have a winner's mindset. When I put my mind to something and I say I'm going to do it, I never think of a plan B. I always think that I'm going to win, no matter what. Even if something goes wrong within my plan A, I just make modifications. I don't say plan B because when I do that, I'm giving myself an opportunity or an excuse to be okay with the failure. So I just make modifications as needed, and I'm just really highly motivated.
One thing I notice, like with entrepreneurs who are successful, is that they either have like an athletic or a military background. Why do you think is that the case? And it's kind of the same with you. Like
100%. Yeah, I mean, no military background for me, but definitely an athletic background. I mean, I grew up playing basketball, even though I'm short, white, and can't jump. I played basketball, and I could shoot the three. And then obviously I worked out. I've been in the gym all my life and owned the gym and everything. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, like I think it just comes down to being an entrepreneur it is a sport. I think it is a sport. It's like, I think that in most sports like basketball or whatever, there's a season to it. Like you train for it, you practice, you practice the moves, the maneuvers, and there's that competitive edge where you always want to, get better and better and better and improve. And I think as entrepreneurs, it's the same mindset. I mean, it's just a different medium where it's like, instead of having, a ball in your hand, you now have a business in your hand. And I think that, being able to improve on that and say, how can I, get better? And then the competitive aspect, one thing for me is like, I've seen other people that when I first started, have businesses where they're doing, 7 figures and I was only doing 6 figures. Well, man, like I hate that. Like I want to make 7 figures. So then I work like heck to do that. And then I see people making 8 figures. Like, well, I want to make 8 figures. So now I work to do that. And I think that, that competitive mindset is so important. Now, I think the one thing that's different about entrepreneurs is as opposed to sports is there is no off season. I mean, it's the only sport where it's 24/7, 365. And that's where one of the biggest differences that you have to kind of adjust to, where in a sport event, like you have your regular season, your playoffs, and your championship, where as an entrepreneur you're going to have different kind of seasons like that, but it's all year long. So it is a grind for sure. And the other thing I'll say too is, for me, specifically CrossFit and working out was a huge driver for my success in business, because one thing I learned in CrossFit was, like, I would say, like, learn to embrace the suck. Like, embrace the suck.
Yeah.
Where, literally you're doing a workout, you think you're going to die, you want to quit. I mean, everything in your body is telling you to stop, but you do one more rep, and then you do one more rep, and then you keep on pushing. And I think that's, you kind of build that mental toughness, right? Where it's like, you're not a snowflake anymore. You're not like getting pushed over. Like you have that mental toughness. So when things are getting tough, like, you're getting tougher. And I think that's so important. It's like that time under tension where, in order to grow the muscle, like, you have to have a weight that's weighing you down, right? And the more that muscle grows, the more weight you can hold and push, right? And same thing in business, like, where, when you first start out as an entrepreneur, like, there's going to be some issues you run into that's going to knock you over, right? But that same issue a couple of years from now is going to be nothing, because you've built up that entrepreneurial muscle, right? To be able to handle that resistance. And so, I've learned too, with just from working out and CrossFit, like, your body doesn't know the difference between, like, working out and business, right? If you're building up those psychological adaptations, like, where it's like, okay, I can handle this stress, I can handle this thing that's coming at me, and keep on going. Like, it doesn't matter if it's working out, or it doesn't matter if it's a business situation. Like, your body just reacts to that, right? And so I think that plays a huge role in it too, I think. And as you mentioned, is with sport is the team aspect, right? Where it's where how to work with your teammates, and you realize that in order to win the game, it's not just going to be you doing everything. Like, you need to have a team around you to succeed. And I think that that's why so many people that come from a sport background or an athletic background are able to succeed in business, because they don't treat it like business, they treat it like a sport. And they know that in a sport, there's teammates, there's rules, there's competitive advantages, there's winning seasons and losing seasons, and but they continue to play the sport. And I think that's really why I think entrepreneurs and athletes are very similar.
So what then got you to the place where you're now? Like, okay, you started all kinds of businesses, and what happened with them?
So I had started those businesses because of money.
Yeah.
It wasn't my calling. You know what I mean? That's why now I know that I'm living in my purpose, because the business I started was called The Pro Stylist, then it was called Hair Society, then it was called Izaku. And these were all businesses that I know with the right partnerships, I would become a extremely wealthy person.
Yeah.
I didn't have the right partners with me. Then that's when that failed. I got into medical sales, created a very successful career doing that. And then from there, that's when I ended up basically starting the personal development journey.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I mean, there's a lot of people selling personal development stuff.
Yes.
What, in your opinion, makes you unique?
My story.
Yeah, your story.
There's a lot of people that are selling bullshit right now, to be honest with you. And there's a lot of people that are not authentic and not really doing it for the right reasons. Yeah. There are very few people that are doing it for the right reasons. A lot of people out there are just doing it for the money and ripping people off and taking advantage, What makes me different is my story and my authenticity. And you can't preach something you haven't lived.
Yeah. You're very authentic. And also the fact that you competed also shows that you developed this character that like an athlete character that is strong and you can overcome difficulties, because that's what really, in my opinion, kind of like is when it comes to entrepreneurship. It's just for me, entrepreneurship is it's just a way of expressing yourself and living your purpose, and you might find that being an employee if you can be with the right company, but sometimes you can't find that, and then you have to create it yourself. What from your perspective is like are some like 3 important things that an entrepreneur has to be, like character-wise or mindset-wise, in order to be able to become successful? Because so many people are trying it. I see it all the time. And so few people are succeeding, actually.
Yeah. Consistent, focused, determined, and impeccable with your word.
I train myself to like boring stuff. Like I would deliberately sit down and I'm like, okay, let me pick them, like about a generally interesting topic or a topic that helps me with business, etc. But I would like to, I like to pick the most boring book, like no graphics inside, just like long texts. And even though I find it boring, I admit,
amazing.
I train to be like the most boring person, and I train to like limit my impressions of things and my stimuluses. I try to be non-stimulating and have the least amount of stimulation just to work on it. Because
I love that. That's why you're so successful. Now you see everything makes sense. Why Digistore is such a fantastic company, because of stuff like that. You need to be able to do boring stuff. You can't just have the flashy, awesome pieces of life that you hear from other entrepreneurs. The people that are comfortable doing boring things for long periods of time, those are the rock stars. Account managers are really the ones that bring all the business with affiliates. They need to be okay with being bored for a few hours, because that's how that's part of the job. Conferences are 4 times a year, maybe 6, but the rest of the time you have to be home doing boring things, and you have to like that and be okay with that, because you can have financial stability and dance on the beach with cool people every single day. You can, but it's harder.
Yeah, because what this really comes down to is your dopamine management. Mm-hmm. If you get stimulated, if you need too much stimulation, it's almost like a drug. It's addictive. Then you need even more and more stimulation, and you get flooded with dopamine, and then you get resistant to it. So you need even more and more. So it's kind of like a death spiral. And the only way to break it is like to intentionally do boring stuff. Amazing. And intentionally expose yourself to boredom for hours and hours and hours.
I love that so much. And I have a newfound respect for you, because not enough people do that or understand it. And everyone feels like they need to chase that good moment, that amazing meal, that amazing TV show, that great music, that great opera piece. And if you keep doing that, especially with us, because we can afford to do all those things, where does it end? You're going to be depressed by month 5 if you don't train yourself to do normal things. I think there's so much beauty in the normal things and being able to do just normal things every day. And how you said it, you need to train yourself to also do boring stuff. Otherwise, it's going to be impossible to be successful in the long run. That's fantastic. Yes. You should write a book just about that topic. I'm serious. So many people are going to read it. I love that. Train yourself to do boring things. That's going to be the title.
I was like, I really thought about it, because I also sensed it within me that I needed more and more, stimulating stuff. And I noticed that I would get bored more easily. I would get less excited. And I would really, it took me a few years to figure out what's wrong with me, because I used to be so interested, when I was a few years ago, and when I was in university, etc., because then at university as a dentist, you're just forced to do stuff. Mm-hmm. You have no time if you want to survive it, you have no time for interesting stuff. You just have to work on patients or on plastic heads and model T-tooth and stuff. And then you have to learn, and it's just boring, and you can do nothing else. That's, what? This is sometimes people ask me oh, don't you regret it? That you wasted so much time? Because I I got a degree in that. So I finished these studies, you know, and even though I knew like as a student already, oh, this is probably not going to be my thing, you know.
You stick to it.
Yeah, I stick to it to complete something because I didn't want to be like, I didn't want that life story of mine being like, okay, I'm a dropout. And even though I didn't really like it, I just like a zombie, I walked through it and I was like, okay, whatever.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. That's fantastic. And imagine how many amazing skills that taught you and helped you to have the patience to do all those boring things. It's probably like, it makes sense why Digistore is such a successful company. It makes all the sense in the world. And that's why you are still relevant. And I'm not just saying this because you're here in person, but I can bet anything that you guys are going to be around for many years to come. And we see flashiness so much, you know. Of course, you can give me the example of Elon Musk or Bezos, but those are the type of people that do the same thing. They do a lot of boring things. They're in the office, sleeping on the office floor for hours in a day. You know, what you see on TV and what's cool for the life of a successful entrepreneur, it's really not the reality. I mean, you've seen the latest Netflix movie. I can tell you half of the people that tell you they're very successful in our industry, they're probably not. And I shouldn't say that, but a lot of people just like to talk about success and they like to pretend they know what it means to be there. But people that actually are successful, like you and I, we're going to be nodding when we hear stuff like this because we know that's the fact, that's the truth. I deal with a lot of successful people. I am blessed to have met many super affiliates, product owners that actually make real profits in our industry. And it doesn't sound flashy or sexy, but being boring is one of the huge, big traits that I've noticed actually stick and work. Think about anything in our industry, especially in the tech world. Think about the time that you have to be in front of the computer to set up the campaigns correctly. And sure, you will get at the point in your life where after you work really hard for 5 years, you'll be able to just set up a campaign and go have fun with your family at the beach for a week. But until you get there, it's the boring people that actually have a lot of money in their bank accounts. It's just how it works. And people that tell you otherwise, it's not the truth. Same with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, thank you. Talking about like the most successful people you know, what traits do they have despite being boring?
Modesty. Because think about it like this. This is a huge life belief of mine, and I'll write a book on this. Sometimes we win. We're going to be amazing at many things, and we're going to have a lot of wins, open a lot of businesses that are successful. But other times, stuff is not going to go the way we want it, right? And those are the opportunities when you don't lose, you learn something. You can learn as a good business person, you can learn from everything that's going to happen to you in a negative way. But in order to be able to learn, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. But to be able to learn, you need to have an open mind. And to have an open mind, you need to be modest. To not think of yourself as the king of the world, the king of the jungle. I know there are many business sites out there that tells you have to be ruthless and cool to lead the world. Sure, you have to be strong. You need to have a strong personality, but you need to be open-minded to be able to learn. So the trait of the people that make a lot of money, they're the people in the corner that are kind, modest, because when you're modest, you are open-minded and you can learn. And, you know, at the other extreme, you see the people that love to buy flashy things, and that's okay too. No judgment. But people that actually have financial stability rarely feel the need to have a brand on their shirt or car or shoes or watches.
If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and never miss an episode of Svencast again.